Invoke Zuen is baseline, and Touch of Death is an execute ability again. That and one or two more things are baseline, giving Windwalker less unpruning than most other specs. But that's not without the non-unpruning things it does get. Things like interesting Covenant abilities and pretty dope legendary effects, actually, which we will cover in today's video with everything that changed for Windwalker in Shadowlands. Almost everything. What we may not get in the video, you can catch it on our stream. Twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline is the place to go and get to know your one true foe? Anyway, we play and test all of the specs eventually and go into deep theory crafting conversations that are most of the time off base. But hey, we can talk and play and have a good day on our stream. Hey! There aren't a lot of things that changed for Windwalker baseline. Expel Harm came from the Brewmaster lands in a more pruned form. It costs 15 energy and it heals you for a small chunk, currently 2% of my HP, and deals 10% of that in damage to a nearby enemy. Incredibly underwhelming so far. It might scale better with more gear, and I was only able to test it with a level 60 character template that had normal dungeon level gear, so it's far from where we will end up having it in deeper into the patch. Touch of Death changed back to how it was once upon a time. Now a 3-minute cooldown, it deals 35% of your HP in damage against players and bosses when they are under 15% HP, or simply kills mobs that have less total HP than you. This is purely an execute ability that contributes less to your overall DPS in a long fight, at least at first glance. It also spawns 3 Chi orbs that you can pick up to generate said Chi at its rank 2. You still kinda lose a big DPS cooldown, so to compensate for that, I think Invoke Zuen is now baseline with an extra added effect. During its 24-second duration, it deals small bursts of AoE damage every 8 seconds for 10% of the damage you did during those 8 seconds. This is similar to the Touch of Death effect you have on BFA right now, already being a 2-minute cooldown. In terms of defenses, finally, Fortifying Brew is also making its way to the baseline kit from the PvP talent world. On a 2-minute cooldown, it increases your HP by 15% and reduces the damage you take by 15% for 15 seconds. 15. All in all, a very good defensive for those prolonged damage intake phases of the fight. This could also open up more versatility when it comes to the defensive cooldowns talent row. The Kyrians of Bastion will give you Weapons of Order, a 2-minute cooldown that makes your Sun Kick something Chuck Norris with fear. The cooldown of Sun Kick will instantly reset, and it will reduce the cost of Chi abilities by 1 for 5 seconds and also boosts your mastery by 15%. This could be one of the potentially best things for Windwalker since the spec has been struggling with single targets for quite a while now, and that is no surprise. And one thing to clarify, the 15% mastery is for the duration of the Weapons of Order, it's not what the Sun Kick does. Bone Dust Brew is not a Brewmaster only thing. It's actually the Necrolord's Covenant ability in Maldraxxus. This baby is a 1-minute cooldown AoE brew that you throw at your enemies, debuffing them for 10 seconds. Hitting them during that window will give you a 15% chance to strike them again for 25% of the main hit's damage. Now, I do say hit, but it's likely per ability use. Begs the question of Fists of Fury. Does the 15% apply to each tick or to the overall cast? Also, Spinning Crane Kick refunds 1 Chi while hitting the enemies affected by the brew. All in all, this is purely intended to be an AoE thing, although can pump some nice damage in single target scenarios for Sun Kick if the chance to proc would be higher. Everything on paper at the moment. The Night Fae of Ardenwald brings you Feline Stomp. This is a big ass stomp that damages enemies in front of you and leaves behind a big mark of a feline. that lasts for 30 seconds, and it also has a 30-second cooldown. While fighting in or on the mark, your abilities have a chance to reset the cooldown of the stomp. There's also a resource generating component that I was not able to replicate all the time. Testing it as much as I could on beta did not point out to any chi or energy generating effect, which was weird. Maybe it's a bug in the current version of the client, but judging its tooltip, you can clearly see that it's supposed to give you chi and energy, which Windwalkers are not really particularly good at dealing with. They have a lot of control over the rotation, so it remains to be seen how this will operate in the long run. Fallen Order is the ability from the Venthyr Covenant in Revendreth. This is a big 3-minute cooldown and an over-the-top storm, earth, and fire combined with mirror images. The mechanic has changed since its initial iteration, so not sure how it will function on live. Right now, it summons adepts to smash your enemies from each of your 3 specs orders. Tiger Order, aka DPSers, will last for 2 more seconds and cast Fists of Fury on the enemies. Sometimes the spawn rate is weird, but it seems to be consistently spawning an adept once every second, and while the older ones expire, it will spawn extra ones so that you have about 3 to 4 out at all times, I think. Still not 100% sure about this. The only consistent thing I was able to notice is that the Tiger Adepts seem to spawn more frequently than the other 2, and it reminds me of the Druid Night Fae ability, so hopefully the randomness of this one is minimal and favors your chosen spec. And of course you have adepts from the other 2 specs of your class, and I was only able to really tell that the Mistweaver or Crane Order adept cast Soothing Mist on you and essentially heal you. I don't know what the Ox ones do. The talent section is shorter this time around. There is only one real change here, and that is to the second to last row. Invoke Zuen is baseline now, and in its place we have the Dance of Chi-Ji Azurite trait from BFA. This is one of the cooler traits we had, although not the coolest, so it's nice to see it not leave the game. One could argue for Open Palm Strikes being here as well, but hey, can't have them all. Currently, all specs that have been receiving legendary powers to test have gotten 4 baseline, then 4 for each spec. In this video, we will look over the Windwalker specific legendary powers, but keep in mind these are not all, and chances are you will get even more over the course of the expansion. To start it off, you have Zuen Battle Gear from a previous tier set. This makes your Fists of Fury increase the crit chance of Sunkick by 30% at the end of the channel. When Sunkick crits, it will reduce the cooldown of fists by 1.5 seconds. Not much to say here, since nothing fundamental changed for Windwalker, you'll likely still want to build it crit and verse heavy, so this effect can potentially be a pretty strong power to have. Pressure Release is a stacking buff that gets a charge each time you deal damage with Fists of Fury to a target. Right now, it seems that each target hit gives you a charge, up to a total of 20 stacks, so AoE. Pressing Spinning Crane Kick releases all of the charges in an AoE burst of damage. Each stack increases the AoE damage by 5%. I was able to test and get a solid hit in with the Dance of Chi-Ji proc that hit was more than half of the mob's HP in an AoE fashion. This has the potential to really scale nice in AoE, and if you use it on a Dance of Chi-Ji proc, it deals almost double the damage of a Touch of Death in an AoE fashion again. So cannot wait to see how this ends up on the release of the expansion. Emperor's Capacitor is a weird one. Spending Chi gives you a stacking buff up to 20 stacks that decreases the cost of Crackling Jade Lightning by 5% per stack. It also increases its base damage by 100% per stack. So far the damage seems incredibly underwhelming, where an Empowered Lightning channels for as much as a Fist of Fury and deals almost the same damage. Strong emphasis on almost. It doesn't cost Chi for one, its range, and can fill downtime in your rotation. There are a bunch of pros and cons to this that need to be factored in. One pro is that Storm, Earth, and Fire also channel it, empowered. There seems to be a weird bug, unless it's not a bug, where casting Jade Lightning does not consume the buff, so you essentially have it for the entire duration you are logged on. Pretty sure this is not intended, and even if it is, to judge the value of this would be to actually fit it in empty portions of your rotation and can give you some time to pull resources during its full stacked channel. And even then, you are essentially not blackout kicking to reduce the cooldown of your big hitters. So I am very on the fence with this one. An interesting one is Rushing Tiger Palm. This one actually doesn't seem to be working on the beta at the moment, but pretty obvious will be fixed on launch. You charge up to 10 yards when you Tiger Palm a target, and you increase the crit chance against that target by 25% for 6 seconds. You can have this effect once every 30 seconds per target, so AoE target swapping can be good, and even if you want it for single target, this can be pretty hefty in terms of a buff. Waiting for it to be fixed so there can be some proper testing. We haven't yet covered soulbinds and conduits, since there's a lot of theory crafting assisted by raid and M+ testing that needs to be done to see how good they are. Considering there are currently 12 soulbinds with dozens of passives and conduits, this could just clog the video too much. I do hope that all of the changes addresses the single target output of Windwalkers. If you love the BFA Windwalker, you will love the Shadowlands iteration. The spec baseline is one of the few that feels good to play. It's fun, interactive, and rewarding when pulled off properly. The main issue the BFA version had was just boss damage overall. It's good, but it's easily outshined by a lot of other specs who don't sweat nearly half as much as you to do those pumped damage meters. Babylonius wrote several articles about the spec down on the Peak of Serenity website, link below, which we strongly recommend you read for more insight and perspective on the spec. Not only that, he actually goes into the soulbinds discussion and assesses them as well. There will most likely be more stuff like that as the spec gets more updates and fixes, so don't miss out on them. And in closing, we would like to thank our patrons for their continued support. We appreciate you guys sticking with us and being so freaking awesome. Really love you guys. And hey, if you, dear viewer, think about supporting us a little bit more, maybe you like our videos, it's definitely not required but highly appreciated. You can check the link down below to our Patreon page, where you will find, links to certain goodies that you might like, and maybe some merch like our Teespring link with our specifically designed hand-drawn t-shirts, mugs, all that kind of stuff. So something like this, has Marcelian&Online on it. Thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you next time.